Morning. I wanted to talk a little bit this morning about recent FDA efforts to try to secure the pharmaceutical supply chain. I am the acting director of a new office we formed, which I'll talk about a little more later, called the Office of Drug Security, Integrity, and Recalls, which we formed at FDA in an attempt to try to deal more holistically with drug supply chain issues. Oops, let's see. So this is what I want to talk to you about today. First of all, I'm going to talk about the reorganization of CDER's Office of Compliance. I know that sounds like a dry topic, but I'll try to make it slightly interesting. Then I want to talk about what we've been doing in the new office since we were formed. And that covers basically 4 topics: a report that we recently published on counterfeit and diversion cases, what we've been doing recently on track and trace, recent International Internet Week of Action, and finally, secure supply chain pilot that we've been working on for some time. So what we did recently in the Office of Compliance was we realized that this area needed much more emphasis, the drug supply chain. And so we formed this new office devoted entirely to supply chain issues. We did this in recognition of several things, primarily globalization, the changing nature of the drug supply chain, and the growth of the international criminal enterprise that has been capitalizing on globalization and weaknesses in the drug supply chain. This is an org chart for the new Office of Compliance. 4 offices. You'll see that the Office of Drug Security, Integrity, and Recall is one of those offices. We also still work very closely with the Office of Manufacturing and Product Quality, which still has primary jurisdiction over GMP issues. And obviously, we cooperate extensively with them on supply chain issues that include things like storage conditions, cold chain management. So this is ODSIR. We have 2 divisions. One is devoted to import operations and recalls. And those may not be immediately obvious offices or divisions that would that logically fit into this office. But I want to talk just for a second about that because, first of all, imports obviously are one of the only decision point that FDA has during the course of the drug supply chain to decide whether a product is going to come into the country or not. Recalls is very important to us because, again, this is an opportunity for us to get bad products off of the market. And so I think that we've seen so far that these teams have been working very closely with the Division of Supply Chain Integrity, which deals more closely with finished drug security and component security in order to first prevent products from coming into the country, then if they get into the country, to get them off the market in this country. And so then, obviously, the second division is the Division of Supply Chain Integrity. We have 3 teams there. Import policy has been dealing a lot with internet pharmacy issues and personal importation issues. Finished drug security team, which has been doing anti-counterfeiting, diversion, cargo theft, and other finished drug security issues. And drug component security team, which has been involved in mostly prevention so far. The idea with that team is to try to prevent future episodes similar to the heparin episode, where we have intentional adulteration of a drug component. So I'm going to move on now. I think I've talked a little bit about this. What have we been doing since ODSIR was founded approximately 4.5 months ago. So far, we've been carrying on many of the projects that the former DISP group, that was a drug integrity security program, that was a sort of previous incarnation of ODSIR before we founded the new office. And one of those projects was to do a review and preliminary analysis of cases, diversion and counterfeit cases that have been undertaken by FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations. So we looked at all the cases from 2003 to 2008 to see if we could find any types of trends in those cases that might be useful to the public, to industry to know about. There are problems with the data in this report, obvious problems. We dealt only with cases that are judicial in nature. In other words, there's been some sort of resolution. And we're dealing only with cases which OCI took. So we're not talking about a broad spectrum of cases. But given those shortcomings in the data, this is what we found. I'm not going to go into great detail about these, but the report details 3 types of criminal drug schemes. The first one is a counterfeiting scheme, and the second 2 are diversion schemes. One thing that I think is noteworthy in the report is the prevalence of diversion schemes, and the previous speaker spoke extensively about those, but this is an important and troublesome trend, both with cargo theft and with other types of diversion schemes. We found, these are some of the top products that were identified in the report. It's a list I think that will not surprise you. Mostly solid oral dosage forms, and mostly high-selling drugs. This, I think, is interesting information. The types of trades that are involved in the criminal schemes. Wholesalers, very prevalent here. Pharmacists, also very prevalent. Doctors, also involved. Sales reps and other pharmacy workers. Often involve individuals, occasionally companies. Okay, so I do, just to finish off that thought, I do urge you all to go on our website and read the report. I think it's interesting. Again, there's shortcomings in the data, but I do think it shows you some trends that might be useful to people who deal with these issues, and I think that's all of you here. Another area we've been working extensively on is standards development. In March 2010, we issued our S&I guidance, which I think most of you are aware of, and was probably discussed at this conference last year. Earlier this year, we had a public meeting on track and trace. And so what we've been doing after that public meeting, we had an open docket for several months, and we accepted public comments on track and trace. We've been reviewing those comments and basically working actively on next steps. And I can't comment much more on that right now, but we do plan to be active in the track and trace area in the relatively near future. So I wanted to just, for more on track and trace, this is an overview of a track and trace system as we envision it, involving the manufacturer serializing and recording the S&I and product info, and then any distributor along the route of a product from manufacturer to patient, tracking the product and authenticating it. And finally, the pharmacy tracking the product and authenticating it. Whoops, I'm sorry. Let's go. So these are some of the goals that we see in a track and trace system. I think they're fairly obvious, but preventing counterfeit drugs, diverted drugs, drugs which have been subject to inadequate or sometimes dangerous storage conditions from getting back into the legitimate drug supply chain. And for, we deal with recalls in ODSIR too. We do think the track and trace of products can lead to more efficient and more quick recalls. This is another thing that we were involved in recently. So I think that we're all aware that there is, in this country, there's a legitimate supply chain and there is everything else that's coming into the country. Call it the illegitimate supply chain. And we are trying to be much more active in that space as well. Recently, we participated again with the Office of Criminal Investigations in the International Internet Week of Action. And this was a huge global operation that was coordinated by Interpol. 81 countries participated. The idea was to target websites that are selling illegal and potentially dangerous, sometimes counterfeit drugs over the internet. So hopefully, as part of this action, the idea was to, one, raise public awareness, two, try to identify some of the websites and the producers and distributors of the illegal drugs, and two, to seize some products. So as a result of the operation this year, 13,500 websites were shut down. That seems like a lot, and I think it is a lot, although in this area, these websites are a dime a dozen, and so frankly, 13,500 is a very, very small dent, unfortunately. We also FDA itself shut down 578 internet drug outlets, and over 45,000 packages were seized by regulators. So again, getting back to this, what we're also trying to do, in addition to this type of enforcement action in terms of internet pharmacies and illegal drugs being sold over the internet, is to raise consumer awareness. And we're trying to work on more innovative consumer pieces that consumers will actually look at the point of purchasing drugs. That's very difficult to do, but it's something that we're working very actively on. So the final thing that I'll mention briefly, we are still working on our secure supply chain pilot program. We have had we've had some landmines along the route with this, but we're still working on it. And we hope to publish another Federal Register notice on this soon. The idea of this pilot is for companies that have very secure drug supply chains to be able to import drugs in an expedited manner, and for FDA to focus its resources on more dangerous and less secure drugs. So we hope to get that permanently off the ground, at least with the pilot, shortly, and we're working actively on that. And thanks again, and I'll leave it back to the next speaker.